Hello, and welcome to our channel, Stories with Silas. We hope you enjoy watching.
Maria's trained palate detected the fraud instantly. The $45,000 wine was fake, but exposing a billionaire's prized possession in front of Manhattan's elite would either destroy her career or resurrect the dreams she'd buried 3 years ago. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The silence that fell over Château Blanc, one of Manhattan's most prestigious dining establishments, was absolute. Waiters paused mid-stride, crystal glasses hung suspended in air, and the gentle murmur of conversation evaporated like morning mist. All eyes turned toward the corner table, where an impeccably dressed billionaire held court, his booming voice cutting through the refined atmosphere like a knife through silk. In his hands, he cradled a wine bottle as if it were the Holy Grail itself, proclaiming its value with theatrical flourish. No one expected what would happen next when the quiet waitress stepped forward to pour. One sip would change everything. Maria Santos had never imagined her life would turn out this way. At 28, she found herself balancing trays in an upscale restaurant, instead of studying wine lists in the elegant tasting rooms she'd once dreamed about. Her small Brooklyn apartment was a far cry from the sophisticated world she now served, a world she'd once hoped to join not as staff, but as a certified sommelier. That dream had died 3 years ago, suffocated by medical bills and crushing student debt. The journey to Château Blanc had been anything but simple. Maria grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Queens, the daughter of immigrants who'd sacrificed everything to give her opportunities they'd never had. Her father worked double shifts at a manufacturing plant. Her mother cleaned offices at night. They'd been so proud when she'd enrolled in the prestigious Culinary Institute's wine certification program, even though the tuition stretched their finances to breaking point. Maria had fallen in love with wine during a high school field trip to a vineyard upstate. While her classmates giggled and gossiped, she'd been mesmerized by the vintner's passionate explanations of terroir, varietals, and the poetry of fermentation. She'd discovered she possessed what instructors called the gift, an extraordinarily sensitive palate that could detect subtle notes and nuances that others missed. It was as if her taste buds could read stories written in grapes and oak. For 2 glorious years, she'd immersed herself in the world of wine. She learned to identify a Burgundy from a Bordeaux blindfolded, to distinguish between wines aged in French oak versus American, to detect the faintest hints of black currant or tobacco or leather. Her instructors praised her natural talent, predicted a brilliant future. She was 6 months away from certification when everything collapsed. Her father's heart attack came without warning. The medical bills were staggering even with insurance. The family's savings evaporated overnight. Maria withdrew from the program, her dreams carefully folded away like the sommelier certification she'd never earn. She found work at Château Blanc as a server, grateful for the steady income, and trying not to feel bitter about serving the world she'd once hoped to join as an equal. Château Blanc occupied the ground floor of a gleaming glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. The restaurant was a temple of gastronomy, where reservations were booked months in advance, and the wine cellar held bottles worth more than most people's cars. The dining room featured soaring ceilings, silk-upholstered chairs, and tables dressed in pristine white linens. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over patrons who thought nothing of spending a month's rent on a single meal. The staff at Château Blanc operated with military precision. Head sommelier Richard Dupont, a severe Frenchman with silver hair and an imperious manner, oversaw a wine program that was legendary in culinary circles. Maria often watched him work, handling bottles with reverence, describing wines with poetic eloquence. It hurt to watch, a constant reminder of what she'd lost. Tonight was a Saturday, the restaurant's busiest evening. Maria had arrived 2 hours early, as always, to help with setup. She polished wine glasses until they sparkled, memorized the evening's specials, and mentally prepared herself for the usual parade of wealthy diners. She had no idea that tonight would be different, no idea that her forgotten expertise was about to be tested in the most unexpected way. As the first guests began arriving, Maria took her position in her assigned section, unaware that her life was about to change forever. The evening began like any other. Maria's section included tables 12 through 15, a prime area near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline. She moved through her routine with practiced grace, greeting a couple celebrating their anniversary, taking a drink order from a group of corporate lawyers, ensuring every detail met Château Blanc's exacting standards. The work was exhausting, but she'd found a rhythm to it, a dance of service that let her mind wander to other things. Then Alexander Whitmore arrived, and the entire atmosphere shifted. Maria noticed the change before she even saw him. The maître d', usually composed and unflappable, suddenly straightened his already perfect posture. Servers began whispering urgently to each other. Even Richard Dupont emerged from the wine cellar, smoothing his vest and adjusting his tie. Someone important had entered the building. Alexander Whitmore was a name that appeared regularly in the financial press. A real estate mogul and venture capitalist, he'd built an empire worth an estimated $4 billion. His developments dotted Manhattan's skyline, gleaming towers of steel and glass that bore his name in bold letters. He was known for his aggressive business tactics, his collection of rare automobiles, and his habit of making headlines with controversial statements about success and merit. At 52, Whitmore carried himself with the unmistakable confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his silver hair swept back from a tanned face. He wore a custom-tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Maria's annual salary, and a watch that could have paid her rent for 2 years. Behind him trailed an entourage, a younger woman in a designer dress, 2 business associates in equally expensive suits, and a personal assistant clutching a tablet. The maître d' personally escorted the group to table 14, right in the center of Maria's section. Her stomach tightened. High-profile guests meant high pressure. One mistake, one tiny error in service, and it could cost her job. She'd seen it happen before. Maria approached the table, forcing her face into a pleasant, professional smile. "Good evening, and welcome to Château Blanc. My name is Maria, and I'll have the honor of serving you tonight. May I start you with still or sparkling water, or perhaps one of our signature cocktails?" Whitmore barely glanced at her, his attention focused on his phone. The younger woman, who Maria guessed was his girlfriend, or perhaps his daughter, it was sometimes hard to tell with wealthy men, offered a tight smile, but said nothing. One of the business associates, a nervous-looking man with thinning hair, cleared his throat. "We'll need a few minutes to look over the wine list," he said. "Mr. Whitmore has very particular tastes." "Of course," Maria said smoothly. "I'll have our sommelier bring our reserve list immediately." Whitmore's head snapped up at that. "No need," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone of authority that came from decades of having people jump at his commands. "I know exactly what I want. I'll be ordering from my own collection." Maria blinked, confused. "Your own collection, sir." "That's right." Whitmore leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. "I called ahead yesterday, spoke to the owner directly. I'm having a bottle from my personal cellar delivered here tonight. A 1947 Château d'Yquem. Do you have any idea what that is? Or should I explain?" The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Maria felt heat creep up her neck, but she maintained her composure. "I'm familiar with Château d'Yquem, sir. It's a Sauterne from Bordeaux, a sweet wine from one of the greatest vintages of the 20th century." Whitmore raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Well," colour me impressed. Most waitresses wouldn't know a Sauternes from a Sauvignon Blanc. He turned to his companions with a theatrical flourish. The 1947 Daïchem is one of the rarest wines in existence. Only a few thousand bottles were ever produced. Most experts consider it the finest sweet wine ever made. The bottle I'm having delivered tonight is worth approximately $45,000. Gasps rippled around the table. The girlfriend's eyes widened. Even the business associates looked impressed, though Maria suspected they'd heard this particular boast before. Whitmore was clearly enjoying himself, his voice growing louder, ensuring nearby tables could hear. $45,000, he repeated, his eyes finding Maria's. That's probably more than you make in a year, isn't it? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Every person at the table looked at Maria, waiting for her response. Maria's throat tightened, but years of service industry experience had taught her how to swallow humiliation with a smile. She kept her voice level, professional, betraying none of the anger simmering beneath the surface. I'm sure it's an extraordinary wine, Mr. Whitmore. We'll be honored to serve it for you this evening. Whitmore chuckled, turning to his companions. Honored. Did you hear that? She's honored. He waved a dismissive hand at Maria. You can go now. When the bottle arrives, I expect it to be handled with appropriate reverence. This isn't some $30 Pinot Grigio. This is history in a bottle, liquid gold. Do you understand? Perfectly, sir, Maria said, inclining her head before turning away. As she walked toward the kitchen, she felt her hands trembling slightly. She clenched them into fists, forcing herself to breathe slowly, steadily. She'd dealt with difficult customers before, entitled investment bankers, condescending celebrities, tourists who treated servers like servants, but something about Whitmore's casual cruelty cut deeper than usual. Maybe it was because he'd specifically mentioned wine, the one subject that still caused her heart to ache with longing. Maybe it was the way he'd made his wealth into a weapon, using it to diminish her in front of everyone. Or maybe it was simply that she was tired. Tired of being talked down to, tired of serving people who saw her as invisible, tired of burying her dreams deeper with each passing day. In the kitchen, she found her friend and fellow server, Jessica Martinez, refilling water pitchers. Jessica was 24, working at Château Blanc while trying to make it as an actress. They'd bonded over their shared experience of pursuing dreams that felt increasingly out of reach. "You okay?" Jessica asked, noting Maria's expression. "You look like you just got hit by a truck." "Table 14, Maria said quietly. "Alexander Whitmore. He's bringing in his own wine and making sure everyone knows it cost more than my annual salary." Jessica grimaced. "Ugh, I've heard about him. My roommate's cousin works at one of his buildings. Apparently he's notorious for treating staff like garbage, lots of harassment complaints that mysteriously disappear." "Sounds about right," Maria muttered. She filled a water pitcher, trying to push down the frustration rising in her chest. "He's bringing in a 1947 Château d'Yquem." Jessica's eyebrows shot up. "Isn't that one of the rarest sweet wines in the world?" "Yeah." Maria's voice was tight. "If it's authentic, it's probably worth $45,000, maybe more. He's already announced the price to his entire table and half the dining room." "Show off," Jessica said, shaking her head. "Why do rich people always need everyone to know exactly how rich they are?" Before Maria could respond, Richard Dupont swept into the kitchen, his expression animated in a way she rarely saw. The head sommelier was usually reserved, even cold, but now his eyes shone with something approaching excitement. "Maria," he said crisply, "Mr. Whitmore's wine has arrived. It's in my office. I've examined the bottle, and if authentic, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'll be presenting it to the table personally, of course, but you'll assist with the service. This requires absolute precision. Do you understand?" Maria nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good. Follow me." She trailed Dupont through the kitchen to his small office near the wine cellar. On his desk sat a wooden case, and inside, nestled in straw, was the bottle. Even from a distance, Maria could see it was old, the glass dark with age, the label yellowed and partially deteriorated. Dupont lifted it with almost religious care, turning it to show her. "Château d'Yquem, 1947, he breathed. The vintage that made history. The year after the war, when France was still recovering, and somehow they produced one of the greatest sweet wines ever made. The concentration, the balance, the complexity, it's legendary. I've read about this wine my entire career, but I've never had the privilege of tasting it." Maria leaned closer, studying the bottle. Something about it nagged at her, a whisper of wrongness she couldn't quite identify. The label looked right, the classic Château d'Yquem design with its ornate script and coat of arms. The bottle shape was correct for the period, the fill level was appropriate for a wine of this age, but still, something felt off. "Is everything all right?" Dupont asked, noticing her frown. "I'm not sure," Maria said slowly. "Something about the label seems what?" Dupont's tone sharpened. "Are you questioning the authenticity of a wine owned by Alexander Whitmore? Do you have any idea who he is?" "I know who he is," Maria said quietly. Then keep your concerns to yourself unless you have concrete evidence," Dupont said coldly. "Mr. Whitmore is one of the most prominent collectors in the country. His cellar is worth millions. I'm sure he knows far more about wine than a waitress." The words stung, even though Maria knew Dupont didn't intend them as personally as Whitmore's had been. He was simply stating what he believed to be fact. She was a server, and Whitmore was a billionaire collector. Why would she know anything about fine wine? If only he knew, Maria thought bitterly. If only any of them knew. Dupont gathered the necessary equipment for the service. A silver wine basket to cradle the ancient bottle, pristine white service napkins, and a collection of crystal glasses specifically designed for sweet wines. He moved with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation, his movements careful and deliberate. Maria watched, her unease growing with each passing moment. "You'll carry the glasses," Dupont instructed. "I'll present the bottle to Mr. Whitmore for his approval. This wine must be served at precisely 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Too cold and the flavors will be muted. Too warm and the alcohol will overwhelm the delicate notes. I've been monitoring the temperature since it arrived. It's perfect." They emerged from the office and made their way through the dining room. Maria noticed that word had spread about the special bottle. Conversations had quieted, heads turned to watch their procession. Even the veteran servers paused in their duties to observe. A wine this rare, this expensive, was an event. Chateau Blanc had served prestigious bottles before, but a 1947 D'Yquem was in a class of its own. As they approached table 14, Whitmore looked up from his conversation, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. He was clearly enjoying the attention, the way the entire restaurant seemed to orbit around his table. This was what he'd wanted all along, not just to drink a legendary wine, but to be seen drinking it, to have his wealth and taste validated by an audience. "Ah, excellent timing," Whitmore announced loudly. "Ladies and gentlemen at this table, you're about to witness something extraordinary. Mr. Dupont here is going to present a wine that most people will never even see in their lifetimes, much less taste." Dupont approached with the bottle cradled in the silver basket, his expression reverent. "Mr. Whitmore, if I may present the 1947 Château d'Yquem from your personal collection. As you know, this is considered by many to be the finest expression of sauternes ever produced. The vintage benefited from exceptional weather conditions and—" Yes, Whitmore interrupted with a wave of his hand. "I know all about it. I've had it authenticated by 3 separate experts, purchased it at auction for $42,000, and it's only appreciated since then. The question is, can you open it without destroying it? The cork will be fragile after 70+ years. Of course, sir, DuPont said smoothly, though Maria saw a flicker of annoyance cross his face at being cut off mid-speech. I'll be using an Asso cork puller, specifically designed for older bottles. It removes the cork intact without breaking it. The sommelier worked with painstaking care, inserting the 2-pronged device between the cork and the bottle's neck. The dining room had fallen completely silent now, everyone watching the delicate operation. Even the kitchen staff had emerged to peek through the service window. Maria held her breath, glasses ready on her tray. With a gentle tug and twist, DuPont eased the cork free. It emerged intact, dark and stained, but whole. A collective exhale rippled through the nearby tables. Whitmore clapped his hands once sharply. "Bravo!" he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Now, let's see if it's survived the decades. Pour a sample for me. I want to assess the color first." DuPont carefully poured a small amount into one of the special glasses. The wine was a deep amber gold, almost bronze in the restaurant's soft lighting. It caught the light from the chandelier above, seeming to glow from within. Visually, it was stunning, exactly what a well-aged Sauterne should look like. Whitmore lifted the glass, swirling it gently, studying the liquid with the intense focus of a jeweler examining a diamond. "Look at that color," he proclaimed to his companions. "That's the color of liquid history. The viscosity, the way it clings to the glass, what we call legs in the wine world. Already you can tell this is something special." He brought the glass to his nose, inhaling deeply. His eyes closed, and for a moment his performative arrogance gave way to what seemed like genuine appreciation. "Honeyed apricot," he murmured. "Candied orange peel, hints of saffron and creme brulee. Magnificent." Then he took a sip. His expression transformed into one of pure satisfaction. He let the wine rest on his tongue for a long moment before swallowing, then smiled broadly. "Perfection," he declared. "Absolute perfection. The balance between sweetness and acidity is sublime. The finish goes on forever. This is why I pay the premium for authenticated rare wines. This is the real deal." He looked up at DuPont. "Pour for my guests. Everyone at this table is going to taste immortality tonight." DuPont nodded and began preparing to pour, but Whitmore held up a hand. "Wait. Not you." He gestured at Maria. "Have the waitress pour. After all, she should have the privilege of handling a wine worth more than her yearly salary. It'll be something to tell her grandchildren." The comment drew uncomfortable chuckles from his companions. Maria felt every eye in the restaurant on her. DuPont looked uncertain, caught between maintaining protocol and contradicting a valued customer. After a moment's hesitation, he handed Maria the bottle with a warning look that clearly said, "Don't you dare make a mistake." Maria accepted the bottle, her hands steady despite the racing of her heart. As Maria lifted the bottle from DuPont's hands, the weight of it registered immediately. Not just the physical weight, though at over 70 years old, the glass was heavier than modern bottles, but the metaphorical weight of what she held. $45,000 of supposed history. A wine that people spent lifetimes hoping to taste. Alexander Whitmore's pride and joy, his proof of superiority. And something about it was wrong. She couldn't articulate exactly what bothered her, not yet. It was like a note played slightly off-key in a symphony, noticeable to a trained ear, but easy for others to miss. As she approached the first guest, Whitmore's girlfriend, she studied the bottle more carefully. The label was aged appropriately. The printing style matched the era. The Château's coat of arms looked correct. Yet that whisper of wrongness persisted. "This is such an honor," the young woman gushed as Maria poured a modest amount into her glass. "I've never tasted anything this expensive before, Alexander says it's an investment-grade wine. I hope you enjoy it, Maria said politely, moving to the next guest. As she poured for the two business associates, she noticed them exchanging glances. One leaned toward the other and whispered something that sounded like tax deduction. The other smirked. Neither seemed particularly interested in the wine itself, only in what it represented, access to Whitmore's wealth and influence. When she finished pouring for all the guests except Whitmore himself, DuPont gestured for her to set the bottle down. But Whitmore had other ideas. "Hold on," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent dining room. "There's a tradition in fine dining establishments. When a particularly rare wine is served, the sommelier or server takes a small taste to verify the temperature and condition. It's customary." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a challenge in his eyes. "I want to see if our waitress here knows the difference between a $45,000 wine and the cheap stuff she probably drinks at home." More uncomfortable laughter rippled through his companions. Maria saw DuPont's face tighten. This wasn't standard protocol, and he clearly disliked having his authority usurped. But he was trapped. Refusing Whitmore's request would create a scene, and Château Blanc's reputation depended on keeping high-profile clients happy. "If Mr. Whitmore wishes," DuPont said stiffly, "you may take a small taste, Maria. Just enough to verify the serving temperature." Maria nodded, her mind racing. In her sommelier training, she had indeed learned to take small verification sips, though it was rarely done so publicly or with such theatricality. She poured a tiny amount into a fresh glass, aware that dozens of eyes watched her every movement. She lifted the glass to her nose first, as she'd been trained to do. The aroma hit her immediately: honey, apricot, candied citrus, exactly as Whitmore had described. But underneath those primary notes, something else lurked, something that didn't belong. A faint chemical sharpness, almost imperceptible, like the ghost of artificial sweetener or synthetic flavoring. Her pulse quickened. She brought the glass to her lips and took the smallest sip, letting the wine rest on her tongue, rolling it around her mouth to expose it to all her taste receptors. The sweetness came first, rich, concentrated, undeniably pleasant. Then the acidity, bright and balancing. But there in the finish, that wrongness revealed itself fully. The flavor disappeared too quickly. A genuine 1947 Château d'Yquem, one of the greatest sweet wines ever produced, would have a finish that lasted minutes. The complexity would unfold in waves. First the fruit, then the honey, then deeper notes of spice and earth, each revealing itself in layers as the wine evolved on the palate. This wine's finish died within seconds, leaving nothing but a faint, almost plasticky aftertaste. Maria's mind clicked through everything she'd learned in her training. She thought of the hours spent studying wine chemistry, learning about how different compounds created flavor and aroma. She remembered her instructor's lessons on counterfeiting, on how forgers created fake labels and bottles, sometimes even fake wine itself. This was a blend, she realized with startling clarity. A competent one, yes, probably a base of decent quality sauterne mixed with concentrates to boost the sweetness and color. The forger had matched the visual appearance perfectly, had even managed to approximate the aroma, but they couldn't replicate the complexity, the layered finish, the ineffable quality that made a truly great wine transcendent. This wasn't a 1947 Château d'Yquem. This was a clever fake, and Alexander Whitmore, with all his billions and his supposed expertise, had been completely fooled. Maria set the glass down carefully, her mind spinning. What should she do? If she said nothing, Whitmore would continue believing he owned a $45,000 treasure. The restaurant would be complicit in the deception, even unknowingly. But if she spoke up, if she challenged a billionaire's prized possession in front of a dining room full of witnesses, the consequences could be catastrophic. Whitmore was watching her with an amused expression, clearly waiting for her to gush about the wine's magnificence. "Well?" he prompted. "I assume you've never tasted anything like that before in your life." Maria looked at him, then at DuPont, then back at the bottle sitting in its silver basket. She thought of her abandoned dreams, her father's medical bills, the certification she'd never completed. She thought of 3 years spent swallowing her expertise, pretending to know less than she did, making herself small and invisible. Then she thought of the truth. Maria took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. Every instinct screamed at her to stay quiet, to smile and nod, and tell Whitmore what he wanted to hear. That's what 3 years of serving had taught her. The customer is always right, especially when the customer is a billionaire who could destroy your career with a single phone call. But another part of her, the part that had fallen in love with wine on that high school field trip, the part that had studied and trained and dreamed, couldn't let this lie stand. This wasn't about pride or ego. This was about truth, about integrity, about not letting a fraud pass unchallenged, even if challenging it meant risking everything. "Actually, Mr. Whitmore," Maria said quietly, her voice steady despite her hammering heart, "I have tasted something like this before. Several times, in fact, during my sommelier training." The table went silent. Whitmore's amused expression faltered slightly. "Your what?" "My sommelier training," Maria repeated, louder now. "Before I started working here, I was 6 months away from my certification at the Culinary Institute. I specialized in French wines, particularly Bordeaux and Sauterne." DuPont's head snapped toward her, his eyes wide with shock. Around them, conversations at nearby tables died away. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Whitmore's face darkened. "Is that so? And what exactly are you implying?" Maria met his gaze directly. "I'm not implying anything, sir. I'm stating a fact. This wine isn't a 1947 Château d'Yquem." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then Whitmore exploded to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "What did you just say?" His voice rose to a roar that echoed through the dining room. "Do you have any idea what you're suggesting?" "This bottle was authenticated by 3 separate experts. I have documentation, provenance, everything. And you, a waitress, dare to question it." "I'm not questioning your documentation," Maria said, forcing herself to remain calm even as her legs trembled. "I'm questioning the wine itself. The finish is wrong. A genuine d'Yquem from that vintage should have a finish that lasts several minutes, evolving through multiple stages. This one dies within seconds. The complexity isn't there. It's a blend, a good one, probably based on a decent Sauternes, but it's been doctored with concentrates to match the color and initial sweetness." DuPont had gone pale. "Maria, these are extremely serious accusations. If you're mistaken—" "I'm not mistaken," Maria said, her voice gaining strength. "The aroma has a faint chemical sharpness underneath the primary notes. The mouthfeel is slightly viscous, like corn syrup has been added. And the aftertaste has a plasticky quality that natural wine never produces. I'd stake my reputation on it, if I had one to stake." Whitmore's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is outrageous. This is defamation. I paid $42,000 for this bottle. I've had it stored in a climate-controlled cellar. The seal was intact. The cork was pristine." "The bottle might be authentic," Maria interjected. "Counterfeiters often use genuine vintage bottles. They carefully remove the original cork, drain the real wine, fill it with a blend that approximates the appearance and basic flavor profile, then reseal it. If they're skilled enough, the only way to detect the fraud is through taste, and even then, only someone with extensive training would notice. The girlfriend had pushed her glass away, looking nauseated. The business associates stared at their wine as if it had suddenly transformed into poison. Other diners had abandoned all pretense of eating, openly gawking at the unfolding drama. Dupont found his voice, though it shook slightly. "Maria, I need you to be absolutely certain about this. You're essentially calling one of the most prominent wine collectors in the country a fool and suggesting that this establishment served fraudulent merchandise. Do you understand the implications?" "I understand completely," Maria said. She turned to face the entire dining room, her voice clear and unwavering. "I know what I'm risking by speaking up. I know I'll probably lose my job. But I can't stand here and let people believe they're drinking a piece of history when they're actually drinking an expensive fake. Wine isn't just about the price tag or the prestige. It's about authenticity, craftsmanship, and truth." Whitmore grabbed the bottle from the silver basket, holding it up like evidence at a trial. "This is ridiculous. The label alone is worth thousands. The authentication documents—" "Can be forged too," Maria said quietly. "It happens more often than you'd think in the high-end wine market. Fraudulent bottles with falsified provenance documents. The forgers prey on wealthy collectors who have more money than actual expertise, who buy rare wines as investments rather than because they truly understand them." The implication was clear, and Whitmore understood it immediately. His hand clenched around the bottle's neck, and for a terrifying moment Maria thought he might throw it at her. "Enough!" The voice cut through the tension like a blade. Gerard Beaumont, the restaurant's general manager and part owner, strode across the dining room with purposeful steps. He was a thin, fastidious man in his late 50s, known for his ability to handle even the most volatile situations with diplomatic grace. But his face was ashen, and Maria could see the strain around his eyes. "Mr. Whitmore," Gerard said smoothly, "I apologize for this extremely unfortunate disruption to your evening. I assure you this employee will face immediate consequences for—" "Consequences," Whitmore snarled. "She should be arrested. This is slander. She's damaged the value of my property by making these baseless accusations in front of witnesses." Gerard cast a sharp glance at Maria, and she saw both anger and desperation in his expression. She'd just put the restaurant in an impossible position. Château Blanc's reputation depended on the satisfaction of clients exactly like Alexander Whitmore, wealthy, influential, capable of destroying a business with a few well-placed words to the right people. "Maria," Gerard said quietly, "I need you to apologize to Mr. Whitmore immediately and retract these statements." "I can't do that," Maria said, her voice steady despite the terror rising in her chest, "because they're true." "You're fired," Gerard said flatly. "Effective immediately. Please leave the premises." "Wait." Dupont stepped forward, his expression troubled. He'd been silent during most of the confrontation, but now he looked between Maria and the bottle with new uncertainty. "Gerard, before we make any final decisions, perhaps we should consider the possibility that Maria might be correct." Whitmore whirled on him. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," Dupont said carefully. "Maria, you said the finish was too short. Can you be more specific about what you detected?" Maria blinked, surprised to have an ally, however tentative. "The primary notes, honey, apricot, citrus, they're accurate for a Sauternes of this style. But a wine of this age and quality should develop on the palate for at least 2 to 3 minutes. New flavors should emerge, caramelized nuts, exotic spices, perhaps even truffle notes. This wine peaks immediately and fades within 15 to 20 seconds. Dupont picked up his own glass, the one he'd been served earlier. He'd barely touched it, too focused on the service to actually drink. Now he brought it to his lips and tasted thoughtfully. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The mouth-feel, Maria continued, encouraged by his reaction. A genuine decem has a silky, almost oily texture from the natural glycerin produced during fermentation. This feels slightly sticky, like there's added sugar, rather than the concentrated natural sugars from botrytis-affected grapes. Dupont swallowed, his face troubled. There is a certain artificiality to the finish. I attributed it to the wine's age, perhaps some degradation, but... He looked at Whitmore. Sir, I think we need to investigate this further. If there's even a possibility that... Investigate? Whitmore's voice dripped with venom. The only thing that needs investigating is how this restaurant hired someone incompetent enough to question authenticated rare wines. I've been collecting for 20 years. I've spent millions on my cellar. And you're going to take the word of a failed sommelier student working as a waitress? The words stung, but Maria held her ground. Mr. Whitmore, when did you purchase this bottle? That's none of your business. Please, Dupont said, this is relevant. Whitmore glared at them both, but finally answered. 2 years ago, at a private auction in Hong Kong, the seller was a reputable dealer who'd acquired it from a French estate. Everything checked out, the ullage, the capsule, the label. 3 different experts verified it before I bid. May I see the label more closely? Dupont asked, lifting the bottle from the basket. He examined it under the light, pulling a small magnifying glass from his pocket. His frown deepened. The typeface is slightly off. Very slightly. Most people would never notice. But the serifs on the Y in Yiquem are marginally thicker than they should be for 1947. Whitmore grabbed the bottle back, squinting at the label. You're insane. That's just aging of the ink. The capsule, Maria said suddenly. May I see it, Mr. Dupont? The cork and the metal capsule that had covered it sat on a small plate on the table. Dupont handed it to her. Maria examined it carefully, running her fingers along the edge. This has been resealed. You can feel a slight ridge where the new seal overlaps the original. It's masterfully done, but it's there. She held it out to Dupont, guiding his finger to the spot. His expression darkened. She's right. There's a secondary seam. The colour had drained from Whitmore's face. He looked at the bottle in his hands as if seeing it for the first time, really seeing it. His girlfriend had gone silent. The business associates stared at their plates, and Gerard looked like he might be sick. The silence that followed was suffocating. Whitmore stood frozen, the bottle still clutched in his hand, his expression cycling through disbelief, rage, and something that looked almost like grief. Around them, the restaurant had become a theatre, every diner transfixed by the drama unfolding at table 14. This can't be real, Whitmore said, his voice hollow. I paid $42,000. The auction house was legitimate. The documentation was flawless. How could... He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Dupont cleared his throat gently. Mr. Whitmore, wine fraud is unfortunately far more common than most people realize, particularly in the ultra-premium segment. There have been several high-profile cases in recent years. Rudy Kurnier one, for instance, counterfeited millions of dollars worth of rare Burgundy. Many of his forgeries fooled even seasoned collectors and auction houses. But 3 experts authenticated this bottle, Whitmore protested weakly. 3 separate appraisers. Were they allowed to taste it? Maria asked quietly. Whitmore's jaw clenched. No, the bottle was sealed. Breaking the seal would have destroyed its investment value. They authenticated based on the label, the bottle, the provenance documents. Exactly what the forger was counting on, Maria said. A sealed bottle can't be definitively authenticated without opening it. And most collectors won't open a bottle this valuable because it immediately loses resale potential. The forger created a perfect trap. Gerard had been silent, processing the implications. Now he spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "Mr. Whitmore, I deeply apologize for this situation. Perhaps we should move this discussion to my office, away from witnesses," Whitmore snapped, "so the story doesn't spread." Too late for that, I think. He looked around the dining room at the scores of people watching. Several had their phones out, though whether they were recording or simply checking something, Maria couldn't tell. One of the business associates, the nervous one with thinning hair, finally spoke up. "Alexander, if this bottle is fake, what about the others in your collection? You said you bought several pieces from that same dealer." Whitmore's face went grey. "The 1961 Petrus, the 1945 Mouton Rothschild. Oh, God. I have over $300,000 invested with that supplier." He sank back into his chair, the bottle slipping from his grip. DuPont caught it before it could fall. "You'll need to have your entire collection evaluated by experts who can actually taste the wines," DuPont said carefully, "not just examine the bottles. There are specialists who focus specifically on fraud detection. I can provide some names." "This is a disaster," Whitmore muttered. "A complete disaster. My insurance company will investigate. There will be lawsuits. The auction house, the dealer." He looked up at Maria, and for the first time there was no arrogance in his expression, only exhaustion. "How did you know? How could you tell from just one sip when experts with decades of experience couldn't detect it from examining the bottle?" Maria chose her words carefully. "Because I tasted it. Really tasted it, the way I was trained to. Not just the initial impression, but the development, the finish, the texture. Great wine tells a story on your palate, and this wine story was too short, too simple. It was like reading a movie script that hits all the plot points but has no depth, no character development." Whitmore laughed bitterly. "I spent more on that bottle than you probably make in a year, and you understood it better than I ever did. The irony is almost funny." "Wine isn't about money," Maria said softly. "It's about passion, knowledge, and respect for the craft. Someone who truly loves wine doesn't just collect it as an investment. They study it, learn from it, connect with it." The restaurant owner, Gerard, had been quietly conferring with DuPont. Now he stepped forward, his expression troubled but resolute. "Maria, I owe you an apology. I was prepared to terminate your employment to protect our relationship with Mr. Whitmore. That was wrong. You demonstrated extraordinary expertise and integrity, even knowing the personal cost." "Does this mean I'm not fired?" Maria asked, allowing herself a small smile. "You're not fired," Gerard confirmed. "In fact, I think we need to have a serious conversation about your role here. We had no idea about your background in wine." "That's because I never told anyone," Maria admitted. "After I had to leave the sommelier program, I just wanted to forget about it. It hurt too much to be around wine every day, knowing I'd never get to work with it professionally." DuPont spoke up, his usual severity softened. "You said you were 6 months from certification when you left the program?" Maria nodded. "Family emergency. Medical bills, the usual story of dreams deferred." What if they weren't deferred?" DuPont said slowly. "What if they were simply delayed?" Maria stared at DuPont, not quite understanding what he was suggesting. The sommelier crossed his arms, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "You demonstrated more expertise in 5 minutes than many certified sommeliers display in their entire careers. That kind of palate, that depth of knowledge, it's rare, exceptional even." "I appreciate that," Maria said cautiously, "but I still need to earn a living. The certification program costs nearly $20,000, not including living expenses while I complete it. That's not something I can afford right now, or probably ever." "What if someone else paid for it?" The question came from an unexpected source. Alexander Whitmore. He'd been sitting silently, the ruins of his pride scattered around him like broken glass. But now he looked at Maria with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What if I sponsored your certification?" The dining room, which had been filled with hushed whispers, went completely silent. Maria felt her heart stutter. "I'm sorry, what?" Whitmore stood, moving slowly, as if he'd aged a decade in the past 15 minutes. "You cost me $42,000 tonight, more if my entire collection turns out to be compromised. But you also saved me from continuing to tout a forgery as genuine, from serving it to business partners and clients, cementing my reputation as either a fool or a fraud." He paused, his jaw working. "I've spent millions on wine, convinced that money equaled expertise. You just proved that knowledge matters more than net worth." "Mr. Whitmore," Maria began, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. I built my fortune by recognizing talent when I see it, even when it's hidden in unexpected places. You have a gift that I lack, despite all my wealth. You can detect truth in a way that transcends documentation and provenance. That's valuable. More than valuable. It's priceless." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, which he handed to Maria. "That's my private number. Call my office Monday morning. We'll arrange for you to complete your sommelier certification, all expenses paid, including living costs. And when you're certified, I want you to evaluate my wine collection. Every bottle, whatever you discover, good or bad, I need to know the truth." Maria looked at the card in her hand, unable to quite process what was happening. "Why would you do this?" Whitmore's laugh was self-deprecating. "Because I'm tired of being the richest idiot in the room. Because you had the courage to tell me something I didn't want to hear when everyone else just wanted my money. Because maybe, just maybe, I can learn something from someone who actually understands wine rather than just owns it." DuPont stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "If Mr. Whitmore is willing to sponsor your education, Gerard and I should discuss your position here at Château Blanc. We have an assistant sommelier opening. The role would allow you to work with our wine program while you complete your certification. You'd train directly under me." Gerard nodded eagerly. "The salary would be considerably higher than your current position. We could adjust your schedule to accommodate your studies. Maria, your expertise tonight has actually done this restaurant a tremendous service. If we'd unknowingly served a counterfeit wine and it had later been discovered, the damage to our reputation would have been catastrophic." Maria's mind spun. An hour ago, she'd been a waitress facing termination. Now she was being offered sponsorship, education, and a career path she'd thought permanently closed. It felt surreal, like a dream she might wake up from at any moment. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "Say yes," Jessica called out from where she stood near the kitchen, abandoning all pretense of professionalism. Several other staff members had gathered to listen, and now they broke into spontaneous applause. Even some of the diners joined in, clapping for the waitress who'd stood up to a billionaire and won. Whitmore's girlfriend leaned forward, speaking for the first time since the revelation. "This is actually really beautiful, like a movie or something." "It's not a movie," one of the business associates said. "It's better. It's real." He looked at Whitmore with newfound respect. "You're doing the right thing, Alexander. Character isn't about how you act when everything's perfect. It's about how you respond when you've been humbled." Whitmore grimaced. "I wouldn't call this humbling. I'd call it getting my ass handed to me by someone making minimum wage plus tips." But there was no malice in his voice. Only resignation and perhaps a hint of grudging admiration. "If I may make a suggestion," DuPont said, addressing the entire table, "rather than letting this evening end on such a difficult note, perhaps we could offer Mr. Whitmore and his guests a genuine bottle from our cellar. Not a 1947 Decem, obviously, but we do have a 1983 Decem that I've been saving for a special occasion. It's authentic, I promise you. I purchased it directly from the Château 15 years ago. Whitmore looked at the fake bottle still sitting on the table, then at DuPont. How much? Complimentary, Gerard interjected. Consider it our apology for the distress this evening has caused, and our gratitude for your generosity toward Maria. I don't need charity, Whitmore said stiffly. It's not charity, Maria said quietly. It's a gesture of respect. One collector to another, because after tonight you're going to become a real collector, someone who values knowledge over price tags. Whitmore studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I accept, and thank you. DuPont disappeared into the wine cellar, returning minutes later with a bottle carefully cradled in both hands. This one was clearly authentic. Maria could tell from 20 feet away by the way DuPont handled it, the reverence in his movements born from genuine respect rather than performative showmanship. He opened it with the same careful technique he'd used before, but this time there was no audience of gawkers, just a small group of people who'd been through something extraordinary together. When DuPont poured the 1983 Daiquem, the color was similar to the fake, that same honeyed amber gold. But when Maria took a careful sniff, the difference was night and day. The aroma was complex, layered, alive, real. She watched as Whitmore tasted it, saw his eyes widen with genuine surprise. This is, he paused, searching for words. This is completely different. I can taste the difference now. God, how did I not see it before? Because you were tasting with your wallet instead of your palate, Maria said gently. You wanted it to be real, so your brain filled in what wasn't there. The evening wound down gradually after that. Whitmore and his guests finished their meal, subdued but no longer hostile. The other diners slowly returned to their own conversations, though Maria caught many curious glances and even a few nods of approval. When Whitmore's party finally prepared to leave, he paused at the table to shake Maria's hand. Monday morning, he said firmly. Don't forget. I won't, Maria promised. After they left, Maria stood in the now quiet dining room, feeling like she'd just run a marathon. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion mixed with something that felt dangerously like hope. Jessica hugged her tightly, laughing and crying at the same time. You did it, Jessica whispered. You actually did it. I almost got fired, Maria pointed out, but you didn't. And now you're going to become a sommelier, a real one. Later that night, after the restaurant closed and Maria had changed out of her uniform, she sat on the subway heading back to Brooklyn. The business card in her pocket felt like it weighed 100 pounds. She pulled out her phone and called her father, not caring that it was past 11. Mija. His voice was groggy but concerned. Everything okay? Everything's perfect, Papa, she said. And then the tears came, 3 years of bottled-up frustration and loss, finally breaking free. She told him everything. The fake wine, the confrontation, Whitmore's offer, DuPont's position. Her father listened in stunned silence. Your mother would be so proud, he said finally, his own voice breaking. I'm so proud. You didn't give up on yourself, even when it seemed like the dream was dead. The dream was just sleeping, Maria said, wiping her eyes. Turns out it just needed the right moment to wake up. 3 months later, Maria stood in front of a tasting panel at the Culinary Institute, completing her final certification exam. She identified 12 wines blindfolded, detecting subtle differences that impressed even the most seasoned judges. When they announced she'd passed with the highest score in her class, she thought of that night at Château Blanc, of the fake wine that had changed everything. Alexander Whitmore attended her graduation ceremony, sitting in the back row. Afterward, he handed her a leather-bound folder. Your first assignment, he said with a slight smile. My wine cellar awaits. I'm ready to learn the truth, whatever it costs me. Maria opened the folder, seeing photos of hundreds of bottles, each representing thousands of dollars, and countless questions. But she wasn't intimidated. She was ready. "Knowledge isn't about how much you paid for the bottle," she said, echoing the lesson that had brought them both to this moment. "It's about understanding what's really inside." And so ends the story of how a waitress exposed a billionaire's fake wine with a single sip, and in doing so, reclaimed her own dreams. Maria's courage to speak truth, even when it risked everything, didn't just save a restaurant's reputation or expose a fraud. It reminded everyone watching that expertise earned through passion and dedication will always outshine wealth without wisdom. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can possess isn't money. It's the knowledge to recognize what's real and the integrity to speak up when others won't. Thank you for reading. If you enjoyed this story, remember that your voice matters, your expertise has value, and dreams deferred aren't dreams denied. They're just waiting for the right moment to bloom.